Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union, Chris Hahn, former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. Gentlemen, as we await this, we're told they're 10 minutes behind, so we might have 3 or 4 minutes to talk here. Matt, the same questions I'm asking Chris Swecker. Can you answer those?
About why the FBI hasn't been more forthcoming?
Capitol Police. There are so many holes in this story. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is... Look, I've worked at the White House. I've worked on the Hill. Chris has worked on the Hill. There are protests in these areas a lot, and a lot of bad people try to descend on the Capitol. Maybe not something as horrific as what we had the other day, but it just seems like the safeguards that would normally be there weren't there. And I don't know why, because it's so clear that the passions in this country on both sides are on full tilt. And I think we've all been on social media watching videos that are incredibly troubling, including videos of Capitol Hill cops that are just like a one cop trying to hold back everybody. I've spent a lot of time walking around the corridors of the Hill, and there's a lot of Capitol Hill cops at work at any one time. So, I'm not blaming because I don't have enough information, but like you, I'd like to learn a lot more.
No doubt.
There's nothing that excuses the crimes that were committed, but clearly there was a lot of whiffs here.
Maybe we get some answers in a moment. Chris, go ahead. What's your take right now?
I am dumbfounded that we haven't had a briefing until now from anyone in law enforcement to tell us what went wrong, why they didn't listen to the warnings. I think they are afraid of the questions they might get. They really took the Black Lives Matter protests very seriously over the summer in Washington, D.C. They did not take this protest as seriously, and they're going to have to answer for that, and they're going to get those questions today. I know a lot of them will be fired. A lot of changes will be made, and clearly they're going to be prepared for the inauguration and the events in the weeks to come. But it was clearly a breakdown, and I, for one, watched that in horror, knowing that my former boss and some friends of mine who still work on the Hill were in grave danger that day, as was our entire republic, because of a failure of law enforcement to take this seriously. People need to be punished, including the president and other enablers that allowed this language to continue and these lies to ferment.
Matt, I don't know what your feeling is on the BLM comparison here. It seems to me over the summer the country was in a different posture. Whether it was Portland or Seattle or Kenosha or Minneapolis or Washington, D.C. or New York City. That's one point. I'll let you answer it in a moment here. The other thing is that the Capitol Hill Police, their primary duty, in my view, is to make sure that the public doesn't cause problems for lawmakers. That's their job. Make sure nothing gets in or out that's nefarious. There hasn't been a tour in the Capitol since going back to late March. And you just wonder what the posture was for the police. How many people were staying home or had vacation, et cetera. There's a lot to stew on that. Just go ahead and give me a review there.
Once again, we're seeing videos. They're anecdotal. It doesn't give you a full picture, but it does certainly seem like there was an understaffing problem. But I think, I learned this on 9/11. Everyone who works in the bubble of the White House, you assume that Secret Service is there to kind of take care of everyone. And you realize when a moment like that strikes, that they're there to take care of the president and the vice president. And the Capitol Hill cops, and with the vice president being there, maybe security personnel were more worried, like you said, about the line of succession and the people in the government, not so much the building and the ground. Somehow something was missed. And as far as the Black Lives Matter comparison is concerned, it's not a perfect example. I would just say this. What I've seen on the Black Lives Matter is a lot of people were scared to call out the violence. There were scores of dead cops by the time we got done with all those violent protests. And not everybody at those rallies were bad people. Not everybody at those protests were bad people. But clearly there was violence and people that meant to foment violence. And everybody was politicians didn't call it out because it involved race, and they didn't want to be accused of being intolerant on race. My view is that the politicians who are honest are the politicians that are saying left-wing violence is not acceptable. It's criminal, and you should go to jail. Violence that comes from the right is criminal. It's not acceptable. They should all be locked up. They should get the full extent of the law. We can't do our politics this way.
Gentlemen, hang on 1 second, Chris.
Nobody said that it wasn't.
I apologize. I got a 2-minute warning. I want to squeeze in Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee from Michigan, House Majority Chief Deputy Whip. Sir, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Bill.
Have you seen the Washington Post reporting here about violence and war, threats online, et cetera, the day before?
Yes, and obviously, I was listening to your earlier reporting. There are a lot of questions that are going to have to be answered. This was a failure of our security apparatus. There's no reason that we should have been placed at such risk. That does not excuse anyone who was involved in organizing or whipping this up, doesn't excuse the president's actions. But it's a serious question as to how we could be so left unguarded. And the consequences, obviously, now, for me personally, I was stuck in the gallery in a really dangerous situation. But for our country, the consequences are enormous.
What about the point we were just discussing about no tours there for Capitol Hill Police to guard against for the past 8, 9, 10 months? Did that matter?
Pardon me, I didn't catch the question.
No tours in the Capitol for the past 10 months. Did that matter? Did that change the posture of police there?
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think it changed much in terms of the line officers. I talk to these folks every single day. They take their jobs very seriously. They protect us, and we saw many of them act valiantly. This was a leadership failure. The failure to observe and prepare and plan, and if in fact there were warnings, the failure to translate those warnings into a sturdier defense is just beyond my comprehension. And you know, it's also frustrating that we're waiting until just now before there's even any opportunity to receive information, let alone ask tough questions, which I know we all want to do. And in this case, it's going to start apparently with this press briefing.
Let's say it's been almost a week. Sir, we brought you on to talk about a little bit about your impeachment position. Joe Manchin says don't go there. What do you think you should do?
Well, I disagree. I think if impeachment's in the Constitution and it's not for this, then I don't know what it's for. Look, I don't like being here. I don't like being in this position, but I just don't see much of an alternative.
Back to Chris on. Chris, I interrupted you. Go ahead and get in your thought here before we get rolling here with the FBI. Congressman, hang on one moment here. Go ahead, Chris.
Sure.
Yeah, for the record, I fully agree with the congressman. The president should resign today. Every Republican in the Senate should be held to account for the Republicans that stood up, and they should stand up and say, Mr. President, time to go. But as for what Matt said, every Democratic official, big and small, called out the violence over the summer. I do not see every Republican official calling out the violence that happened to our Capitol in an attempt to overthrow our republic by the President of the United States on Wednesday. So I'm waiting for that from the right wing. I'm waiting for that. I expect Lisa Murkowski, I expect other Republican senators who know better to walk into Mitch McConnell's office and say, expel Josh Hawley, expel Ted Cruz, or we're walking across the aisle. I am surprised that hasn't happened yet. I hope it does. I do believe there are some good Republicans, and I hope they will stand up to this president and to the lies that have been told by the right wing for the past 4 years.
They were objecting to the election itself in terms of pushing for an audit on the election before they move forward. I'll get back to that point in a moment here. Matt, do you want to jump in on that real quick here?
Yeah, I do. This is part of the toxicity that we have to move away from. You know, I worked on President Bush's campaign in 2000, and Democrats objected to that electoral college vote. Then they objected when he won re-election in 2004. I disagree with that. I don't think those Democratic members should have been censored or expelled. It's part of what they're allowed to do in our system where we adjudicate tight races. They also objected to Donald Trump's win in 2016, and we spent years and years and years talking about Russian collusion.
Yeah.
We've got to figure out a way.
The Democratic leader didn't whip for the objection
guys.
like
Chris
Kevin McCarthy
and Matt
did.
and Congressman Kildee stand by here. We expect to hear from Michael Sherwin from the District of Columbia